Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Henderson. I am a senior attorney at JWL International, where I run the streaming and media practices. And I've been thinking about media for a very long time, and I've been involved with a lot of media companies. And we're going to be talking today about real-time AI and the long tail and how we can unlock new streaming revenue and new experiences. And we're going to get into that. And if you don't remember what the long tail is, we'll be defining that as well. So, just to recap, I am an attorney and I'm focused on streaming distribution and NIL deals and what have you. And so you could always come to me and ask about those things, but I've also always had my hand in media. I have written books about pop culture called California Tiki and Hollywood Tiki. I've written a lot of comics for Marvel. I've written comics for IDW and Image. I created Doctor Strange's daughter for Marvel Comics. I've always had my finger in the entertainment pie, and I also run a publishing company. Our biggest book, by the way, is this one, Junk Film, which is all about bad movies, and a lot of them are on what I would call the long tail, the kind of thing that we're often not taking advantage of, and we may need to turn to AI to help us with. So this that you're looking at right here is a wonderful joke that The Onion did, and it was saying that Netflix should introduce an all browsing plan where you would do nothing but pay $5 to do nothing but try to pick a movie. And you could do that 24 hours a day and just look at hundreds of posters. Now, here's what's interesting about this. This this headline from The Onion came out in 2014. So that's 11 years ago they made this comment. And the problem of thousands of titles and fatigue with trying to find what you want to watch has only gotten worse over time. That is hilarious to me that they anticipated that this is where we would be. You would be in a world where there are literally thousands and actually more like tens of thousands of titles, and you still wouldn't be able to find what you want because my favorite problem, which is discovery, still remains. There's a rule that we call the 80-20 rule, which is that right now, 80% of watch time, of people watching stuff, they're watching only the top of the heap, the top 20% of content. There is all of this content that is not being watched. And yet, money that people make, especially in the world now that fast and other ad-supported content is replacing subscription or at least augmenting subscription, and people are switching back and forth all the time. Um, the real opportunity to make money in placing ads is in finding more and more relevant content, and that means figuring out ways to dig into that lower 80 and but see where if your name is Joe, where Joe's content is, and there's many more opportunities to give you a better experience and make more money off of it. So currently, search and discovery, this is my absolute favorite problem in the world. And if you go in, I think Roku does an excellent job of allowing people to search, but it's still very limited. You right now, we have an example here. You start entering CA, and what actually goes on in the background is that an algorithm is running that is using a lot of different weighting procedures to show you, well, is he going to want the Candyman or the cable guy or Carrie? And that is based on maybe your past viewing, maybe the past viewing of people in demographics similar to you, depending on what kind of information the Roku system knows about you, or Fire TV or what have you. Maybe it's based on who's getting paid, so that the cable guy bumps up to the top more quickly because in the weighting of relevance right now, that money is more relevant than anything else. But what are we doing at this point? You're just entering in a title. Now Netflix is trying to experiment more with concept searching, like lakes or surfing or what have you. But if you've tried searching for movies, you'll know that we're still in a world where that is honestly not being farmed up as much as we can, and you're going to see the most familiar titles over and over. So the long tail in streaming. The term the long tail was invented back in 2004, I think, by Chris Anderson in Wired magazine, and he was talking about how in the future we would all have personalized media experiences, and we would be finding things that is oriented towards us, and that because the biggest, most popular titles are at the beginning of the dinosaur, and the long tail is stuff that is only relevant to a couple of people. And my image here that I chose to share is one of my favorite examples, which is Sherlock Holmes. There's a million different Sherlock Holmes. There's the very popular BBC Sherlock Holmes of just a couple, Masterpiece Theater just a few years ago. But many people's favorite is the guy on the upper right, which is Jeremy Brett, which was the Sherlock Holmes from the 80s. But one of my favorites is the guy on the lower right, which is Ian Richardson. And here's an interesting thing about Ian Richardson. Ian Richardson played Sherlock Holmes in like two movies in 1983 that belonged to Grenada. And then there was a big opening up of the rights to Sherlock Holmes, and BBC won. And so BBC came out with their Jeremy Brett and killed the Ian Richardson series in its cradle, leaving behind two movies that were played often on HBO in the early 1980s. Why do I mention this? Because for a lot of us, we weren't actually watching the BBC series because we were in the United States. We were watching the two Ian Richardson movies, of which there were no more because of weird contract stuff going on in the background that none of us knew anything about. But it's relevant to me. I'm like, hey, I want to see the Hound of the Baskervilles with Ian Richardson. And so we need a way for content that is relevant to me to come up and say, hey, you seem to be the guy who's really always looking for this obscure Lost series. Or for that matter, every one of these guys you're looking at starred in a version of Hound of the Baskervilles. And actually, Peter Cushing, I know this because I know this, starred in two versions of the Hound of the Baskervilles. There should be a way for you to go to your system and say, I know that you don't just like detective shows and you don't just like Sherlock Holmes, you like Hound of the Baskervilles. And here's a bunch of them. And if you only like Hound of the Baskervilles before the 1990s, here's those. We need to get so smart, and that can be done with deep metadata and AI that is learning and creating connections faster than we humans can. By the way, this is another really fantastic example. I think it's one of my favorite examples of long tail content that is not being taken advantage of. Warner Archive, very briefly, was a streaming service that I think I was one of the only like 10 subscribers to, which was where old Warner content was made available for a subscription. And it didn't really work out, and it didn't prove out, and so they took it away. But it was the only way briefly to find the long lost Kennedy era Warner Brothers universe, which was a shared universe of detective shows that were on from like roughly 1958 to 1963. Bourbon Street Beat, Surfside 6, 77 Sunset Strip, and Hawaiian Eye. They actually carried characters over between these shows. It was a shared universe that belonged to Warner and still belongs to Warner. It is shocking to me that this stuff, by the way, is not accessible right now. You would have to find ways that are not even legal to watch 77 Sunset Strip today. I don't know why. And the reason why that is often given is, hey, it costs too much to run the CDNs to even stream the content. But I believe that if you could figure out ways to use real-time AI to merchandise content directly to you that is relevant to you, it would be well worth the pennies that it would cost to actually stream that instead of Kojak or something else that might not be as relevant to you. And if you don't know Kojak, it doesn't matter. It's another long tail title. Here's a really fun example of what we should be doing in TV and that we're not doing today. So as somebody who was a teenager in the 1980s, what I came to notice was that all of the TV shows in the 1980s were haunted by the war in Vietnam. If you don't remember the war in Vietnam, you're lucky, and it ended in 1975. So for instance, on Head of the Class, 15 years after the fall of Saigon, after the end of the Vietnam War, they had a whole episode over fighting among the teachers on how the war in Vietnam should be taught, and it was related to the musical Hair. If I am on Fire TV and it says, hey, here's an episode of Head of the Class, and by the way, it's relevant to Hair, and here's Hair, which was a movie that starred Treat Williams, and hey, here's a war movie starring Treat Williams, we could package that stuff together. How? With metadata and with smart learning that brings it back to you. We could also do things like detective shows that reference war. Miami Vice, which starred Don Johnson, who is actually the father of Dakota Johnson, which is another interesting connection that you could create. Miami Vice starred Don Johnson, and in Miami Vice, he was a detective who was haunted by the Vietnam War. Highway to Heaven featured an episode where people were haunted by the Vietnam War, and this is 10 years after the war. China Beach was a television series that is very difficult to get your hands on right now. That was all about the Vietnam War, and it was all related to a book by Linda Van Devanter called Home Before Morning, which was influencing all of these shows. There is no reason. Home Before Morning should be a metadata piece in the background that is tying a lot of content together and said, I see that these people, this viewer is interested in content that seems to hit the themes of Home Before Morning, which was about nurses and people dealing with the stresses of that war and of coming back to the United States. So relevant that there was a bestseller in the last 6 months called The Women by Kristen Hanna, which was about exactly the same topic. If you were interested in The Women by Kristen Hanna and you go to Fire TV, it should be saying, hey, by the way, have you seen China Beach? Because it's basically the same topic. And also this one episode of Highway to Heaven starring Matt Perry, same topic. So the business case for the long tail is that there is low competition for niche segments, meaning the people who own the particular pieces of content are the ones who are most able to put these packages together. So whether you're a platform and you've gained access to a lot of the content, or whether you're like Warner with the detective shows I was talking about, or if you're Sony with access to Gidget, packaging things together is ways of making much more money off of them. I'm actually one of my companies published a patent recently called something that's going to help, I think, which is called machine learning assisted personalized real-time video editing and playback, which is a lot of words. But what that was really about is, what if we could find ways to use deep metadata that is both user created or licensed from third-party metadata providers, and munge all of that together and create on the fly collections of content and versions of content. And so an example, one of my favorite examples, there used to be a blog. If you ever watched 90210 back in the 1990s, popular soap opera that's been rebooted a couple of times. So there were a lot of people who didn't like the star Shannon Doherty. And so they would say, I hate Brenda. Nowadays, actually, there's lots of revisionism and people like Brenda. So I was like, what if there was a technology that said I could watch a version of the show that was only Brenda? So I would be watching the show, and if the platform was running this real-time video editing, it's reaching into the metadata, it's learning from me, and I could say, hey, play for me a version of this show that is only the Brenda scenes. And on the fly, the technology would take the episode of 90210 and create an 18-minute version that was only the scenes with Brenda in it. You could reverse it and say, no scenes with Brenda. Or you could say, I don't like violence, so cut out all scenes with violence. How would we know if there was a scene with violence? Through AI, analyzing the scenes and taking advantage of tagging that people have done in a variety of different metadata providers. What we need is the technology to actually be munging it together and then processing it. There's a million applications of such a technology, because it means that we could start saying, look, in drama shows, there are often funny scenes. Create for me this episode, but only the funny scenes in it, or all of the episodes of the season, but only the funny scenes in it. People already do this on YouTube. They'll create supercuts, but that requires a talented individual going into their favorite show and just pulling out the funny scenes. But there's no reason with the use of tagging and metadata that we can't do that using AI. And by the way, I'm able to do a lot of connections in my head, but the bottom line is we should be looking not for the connections that you or I can envision, but the connections that we don't know, but that will resonate deeply with the viewer. Let me show you an interesting example. This is Friday the 13th, Part 3. So Friday the 13th, Part 3 from 1982 was a 3D movie that was the third in a famous horror series. Okay, but what I went in and did while I was working on an application was just think about all of the deep kind of connections that we actually currently are not doing. Like we're very good at saying, hey, show me horror movies. We're very good at saying, show me slashers. We're maybe pretty good at saying, show me slashers from the 80s. We're not very good at saying, show me slashers that were originally released in 3D and were soon released in 2D. Show me slashers with iconic images that first appear in a later chapter of the film, such as, if you remember Jason Voorhees, the killer in Friday the 13th, as a hockey mask, that hockey mask only appeared in the first film. There is a character called Pamela Voorhees. If you've seen Scream, it references who was the killer in the first Friday the 13th movie. It wasn't Jason, it was Pamela Voorhees. Pamela Voorhees was a character that, so you could pull out of that, hey, this is an example of characters who are unknown to be that who are later revealed to be the killer that you don't think is the killer, but also are reused in later films. There's a million other ways. There are as many pieces of metadata that you can get out of any particular film as users can create and as connections can be drawn. So this kind of connection is easy, although I still wished that we were better at doing it. This should be easy. We should be, we should be able to go to Paramount and not only say, I want to see all the Star Trek, but I want to see all the times that Captain Kirk was played by different actors, because at this point there's been like 3 or 4, if you count the different television series. So all the Supermans, that's pretty easy, but I'd love to see more. What gets harder is those connections, but the connections can be done by AI. For instance, once again, I was talking about Friday the 13th. This is Betsy Palmer playing Pamela Voorhees in 1980. This is Nana Visitor playing the same character in 1993, creating a reasonable connection between Star Trek. This is Nana Visitor on Star Trek Deep Space Nine in let's see, 93. This is 2009. Anyway, that creates a connection between Friday the 13th and Star Trek. And by the way, if you want to look for horror actors who also appeared in movies about World War II, this is Betsy Palmer in Mr. Roberts, which was, by the way, about war trauma and trying to figure out whether or not you want to get involved in the war. And so those branches should constantly be building. Another thing that we could do with real-time filtering, of course, is much, much more robust parental controls. Now, remember, a lot of people get nervous about this because they're like, well, I don't know if I want art to be changed on the fly. Only if somebody signed up for it, and if you're the platform or the provider, only if you have the rights. But let's assume a universe where you have all the rights. It would be real useful to avoid seeing Glenn's, spoilers, head get bashed in the premiere of the premiere episode of Walking Dead. I can't remember what season that was. This stuff can be done. There are plenty of people putting together family-friendly metadata that can be licensed and then be munged together. So as I mentioned, subscription revenue, but also advertising revenue can be greatly, greatly enhanced by figuring out how to take advantage of these increasingly exotic and thinly sliced connections. The connections here, by the way, this is with the Warriors and Mad Max Fury Road and the Phantom Menace, all of which basically rework the plot of the great Greek story Anabasis. Is that a connection that would be relevant to you? I don't know. It might be relevant to me. There's also an interesting connection here. This here in the Warriors is a trash bonfire. Back in the 1980s, for some reason, trash bonfires were a very, very common stylistic element. I don't know why, but if Kiss had a video, there was a trash bonfire going on in the background. It'd be really cool if I could go onto Fire TV and say, show me movies with trash bonfires. You would really enjoy seeing what came up. And then, if needed, show me just the trash bonfire scenes. There are companies who are taking advantage of AI-powered search. Netflix is certainly on top of this. They are currently testing out intent-driven things, and their example is funny but not too scary, or funny but not slapstick. So Netflix is working on it, although if you, the problem, of course, with with one particular streamer is the answers will only come from the content that they have access to. Nevertheless, Netflix has such a big library that they're still going to be able to find much more relevant content to you the more they can base their search on AI. Um, this is a wonderful example I wanted to bring up. So in 1981, there was a James Bond movie. It was called For Your Eyes Only. It featured this wonderful poster with Sir Roger Moore, who was the third cinematic James Bond. Anyway, the film featured this girl in a bikini. In some segments of the United States, the bikini photo was considered a little too risque, and so they introduced various locally produced posters for Your Eyes Only that included either a skirt or jean shorts in one example that I saw. Uh, we used to have to do this stuff with pen knives and with localized deals, but we can find ways to bring you this existing media and say, I want to see For Your Eyes Only, but I want to see the version that was cut for television in 1981. That should exist because I guarantee you that Amazon, which owns James Bond, has the right to that version. Do they want to put it out? Who knows? But in a world where storage gets cheaper and cheaper and where you can monetize more and more slices of the content, we absolutely should be making it available. By the way, this is Sir Roger Moore on a beach. Very interesting thing here because this beach scene involves a famous trope called "my accent is slipping," which if you read a lot of TV tropes, which is all about TV tropes, goes into films where the actress's accent starts to not make sense to the character anymore. It's actually worked into the script there, but it's used as an example in a lot of films. So out of a scene like this, I could get lots of things that are obvious, like Roger Moore and later actors to play a famous character, or Walther PPKs, or beaches, but we could also go into something like the use of accents. Can we store that much data? Absolutely, because it's just metadata and we can monetize it and it'll be useful. So the challenges that we've been talking about of using AI to dig into and create new metadata and create connections basically involves, first of all, the complexity of licensing, making sure that you have the rights to do what essentially are constantly new versions of content, or farming up new versions or lost versions or what have you. You have to get that stuff squared away. But in a lot of cases, the platform actually has it, or the content provider actually has it. And if you can describe it, I can write you a contract for it. But there's also the computational demands of real-time processing that we have to figure out. Like, can we actually, once we're testing it, can we do all of that computation on the fly? Will you notice it? I actually believe that in the cloud we can, certainly locally we can in the device, but and likewise, we have to make sure that the content is as good as you can get it when you actually see it. So those are just streaming technology matters. But it's absolutely doable. The implications, of course, is that content lasts longer. This example right here, this is Gidget. This isn't just Gidget. This is Sally Field, award-winning actress Sally Field as Gidget, playing Gidget in the 1965 television series, which lasted all of one season, and yet for some reason, people continue to remind it. There are people to whom that is relevant, and Sony owns it. So there is no reason, why wouldn't you make it available and keep using it into the future and finding new connections? Because by the way, Gidget was a real person. Her name is Kathy Kohner. She lives in Malibu. She's a great girl. And she has published books and there are documentaries about her. I should not only be able to look up Gidget, it should be able to show me not only here's Gidget, but here's the 60s TV series, here's the 70s remakes, here's the 50s TV movies, what have you. We don't need to predict these things. I'm using examples that I just happen to know, but the machine will be able to know it because it can create that web of connections that is beyond our imagining. So, key takeaways. First, by the way, this right here is a look at Tom Cruise in 1993 doing his wire fu to get into a CIA vault. This is the same stunt being done in 1964 in a heist movie called Top Copy. So yet another connection that people don't generally make all the time. The takeaways: AI personalization using deep metadata and connections that are being created on the fly based on searches, based on user experience, can create new experience and unlock lots of long tail revenue and create new modes of viewing. So I love talking about this stuff. I love geeking out about it. If you're a streamer or a platform and you're interested in talking about it from a business perspective, I can do that. But if you're just a movie geek, I'm totally happy to talk about that as well. Uh, my name is Jason Henderson. I'm a senior attorney at JWL International, running the streaming and sports practices. Contact me at jdh@jwlinternational.com. Look for me on LinkedIn, Jason Henderson Esquire. I am so thankful to have a chance to talk to Digital Hollywood. I've been enjoying this show for many, many years. Victor Harwood is a saint amongst men and a great leader, and I am so thankful for the opportunity to share my excitement about this realm of technology with you. That's all for me. Thanks a lot.